In broad daylight, the police slapped the wrong man. The sound echoed across the street. People froze. Steven Seagal stood still. No anger on his face. No shock in his eyes. The crowd gasped. Phones came out. Whispers spread fast. Everyone expected shouting. Everyone expected rage. But it never came. Steven did not flinch. He did not step back. He did not raise his voice. The officer waited for a reaction. None arrived. Instead, Steven slowly lifted his eyes. Calm. Focused. Unshaken. That silence was louder than any scream. That stillness made people uneasy. A child nearby stopped crying. An old man shook his head. A woman covered her mouth in shock. This was not fear. This was control. The officer shifted his stance. The crowd leaned in closer. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Steven Seagal was not begging. He was not explaining. He was not defending himself. He simply stood there. The sun was bright. Cars passed by. Life continued around them. Yet time felt frozen. That single slap changed the air. Not because of violence, but because of what followed. Respect was tested. Authority was questioned. Egos were exposed. The officer expected submission. What he met was discipline. Steven breathed slowly. Measured. Steady. Every second made the crowd more tense. Every moment built pressure. People sensed a turn coming. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Something deeper. Something that would leave a mark without a punch. This was not a fight story. This was a lesson forming in real time. A lesson about power. A lesson about restraint. A lesson about dignity under disrespect. No sirens yet. No shouting yet. Just eyes locked and silence growing. The officer realized it too late. He had not slapped an ordinary man. He had challenged calm. And calm was about to answer. It was a bright daytime afternoon on a crowded city street. The sun sat high above the buildings. Shadows fell sharply on the pavement. Traffic moved slowly. Cars stopped and started again. Horns sounded in the distance. People walked past carrying bags. Some talked on phones. Others waited at the crossing lights. Nothing about the moment felt unusual. Steven Seagal walked alone along the sidewalk. No security followed him. No cameras announced his presence. He wore simple clothes. A plain jacket. Worn shoes. He did not rush. He did not look around nervously. His pace was steady and relaxed. He looked like just another man passing through the city. As he reached the corner, two police officers stepped forward. Their movement was sudden. Their posture was rigid. One officer raised his hand. "Stop right there." People nearby slowed down. Some turned their heads. Others paused mid-step. Steven stopped calmly. He did not argue. He did not question the order. The officer looked him up and down. His tone was sharp. His eyes carried suspicion. "Where do you think you are going?" Steven answered calmly. "I am just walking." The officer scoffed. He mistook calm for arrogance. His voice grew louder. His words grew harsher. "You think you can ignore police instructions?" Steven remained composed. His hands stayed visible. His posture stayed neutral. He showed no fear. He showed no challenge. The second officer watched silently. His eyes moved between Steven and the growing crowd. People on the sidewalk stopped completely now. Some leaned against parked cars. Others raised their phones slowly. The air felt tense. Not dangerous yet, but uncomfortable. The officer stepped closer. Too close. His assumptions were already made. His judgment already formed. Steven spoke again calmly. "There is no problem, officer." That calm response only irritated him more. The officer believed respect had to be forced. He believed authority meant dominance. He saw simple clothes and quiet confidence. He misunderstood both. Around them the city kept moving. Lights changed. Engines hummed. Yet this small space felt sealed off. People whispered. Why is he being stopped? He looks calm. A shopkeeper stepped outside to watch. A cyclist slowed near the curb. Stephen did not look at the crowd. He focused on the officer. His face showed patience, not weakness. The officer raised his voice again, demanding answers that were already given. The tension climbed slowly, like heat under the sun. This was no chase, no crime scene, no emergency, just a moment shaped by ego. Stephen stood there knowing something important. How a man reacts under pressure reveals everything. The officer mistook silence for guilt. The crowd mistook calm for courage. And this setup, this ordinary afternoon, this simple street, was about to become a lesson seen by everyone. Before we continue, comment below. Where are you watching from today? The officer suddenly accused Stephen of resisting. The words came sharp and loud, unprovoked. Stephen looked at him calmly. His voice was steady. What seems to be the issue? That question changed everything. The officer took it as defiance. His jaw tightened. His patience disappeared. Without warning, his hand swung. The slap landed hard across Stephen's face. The sound cut through the street. Clear. Sharp. People froze instantly. Footsteps stopped. Conversations died. Phones came out in silence. No one spoke. Everyone stared. Stephen did not move. Not an inch. He did not touch his face. He did not step back. He did not react the way everyone expected. No shouting. No anger. No threat. That calm disturbed the scene more than violence ever could. The officer stood waiting. Expecting rage. Expecting fear. Neither arrived. Stephen slowly lifted his head. His eyes were steady. Focused. The crowd held its breath. Some people whispered. Why is he not reacting? Is he scared? Others sensed something deeper. This was not fear. This was restraint. Stephen took a slow breath. Then another. That silence pressed heavy on the officer. The power dynamic shifted. The second officer glanced around nervously. He noticed the phones. He noticed the witnesses. The crowd had grown. People stepped closer. Curiosity turned into concern. A man muttered, "That was unnecessary." A woman shook her head. Stephen spoke softly. "You should be careful." No threat. No insult. Just truth. The officer scoffed again, trying to reclaim control. "Do not tell me how to do my job." Stephen stayed still. Hands visible. Posture relaxed. That calm made the officer uncomfortable. It exposed something. Authority without discipline. The street felt smaller now. Tighter. Sunlight reflected off nearby windows. Sweat formed on foreheads. Time stretched. Stephen's silence spoke louder than words. It questioned everything without accusation. The crowd sensed it. This was no ordinary stop. The slap was no longer the focus. The response was, or rather the lack of one. Stephen had control over himself. And that control controlled the moment. The officer shifted his weight. His confidence cracked slightly. He glanced at his partner. No support came. Phones continued recording. Stephen finally spoke again. Calm. Measured. There is no need for this. That sentence landed heavier than the slap. The officer felt it. The crowd felt it. This was not resistance. This was composure under humiliation. The street understood now. Something had gone wrong. Very wrong. And the consequences were no longer avoidable. The conflict was no longer physical. It was moral. And everyone watching knew. This moment would not end quietly. The crowd whispered. Low voices. Uneasy tones. No one laughed. No one shouted. Some stepped back. Others leaned forward. The energy had changed. A few officers nearby looked confused. They were not sure how to respond. They were not trained for silence like this. Stephen slowly turned toward the officer. No sudden movement. No aggression. His posture stayed relaxed. his eyes steady. When he spoke, his voice was calm but firm. Control your hands before they control your future. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. They cut through the air. The officer froze. His jaw tightened. His eyes flickered. That sentence carried weight. Not as a threat. As a warning. The air felt heavy. Thick. People sensed something deeper than anger. This was accountability arriving quietly. A man in the crowd nodded slowly. A woman lowered her phone slightly. Even the second officer shifted uncomfortably. He understood the meaning. Stephen did not raise his voice. He did not insult. He did not lecture. Yet the message landed hard. The officer took a step back without realizing it. Not out of fear. Out of uncertainty. The crowd felt the shift. Power was no longer loud. It was composed. Traffic sounds faded into the background. Even the city seemed to pause. A shop owner crossed his arms. A passerby whispered, "That man has discipline." Stephen stood tall. Still, his calm was not passive. It was deliberate. Every movement was controlled. Every word measured. The officer tried to speak. Nothing came out. That silence spoke again. People sensed consequences forming. Not violent. Administrative. Inevitable. The second officer looked at his radio. Hesitated. He knew this moment would not disappear. The crowd grew quieter. Respect replaced curiosity. Stephen held the officer's gaze. Not challenging. Expectant. As if asking him to choose wisely. The sun reflected off the officer's badge. It suddenly looked heavier. The weight of responsibility settled in. Stephen finally looked away. Not dismissive. Merciful. The officer swallowed hard. The street was no longer a stage for authority. It was a mirror. And everyone saw the reflection clearly. The reaction was complete. No applause. No cheers. Just understanding. The air remained heavy. Because truth had just been spoken, a senior police vehicle arrived fast. Its lights cut through the afternoon traffic. The sound pulled every eye toward the street. The crowd parted instinctively. Whispers grew louder. Phones rose higher. The vehicle stopped sharply near the scene. A high-ranking officer stepped out. His uniform was crisp. His presence carried authority. He scanned the situation quickly. The crowd. The officers. Then his eyes landed on Stephen. He froze. For a brief moment the street went completely silent. The high-ranking officer straightened his posture. His face changed instantly. Recognition. He walked forward with urgency. "Sir, we are sorry." Murmurs spread through the crowd. People exchanged confused looks. The officer continued speaking with respect. "We did not realize you were here." Stephen remained calm. His expression unchanged. The senior officer turned toward the others. His tone shifted. Sharp but controlled. "Stand down." The officer who had slapped Stephen went pale. The color drained from his face. His confidence vanished. He took a step back. Then another. The second officer avoided eye contact. The senior officer looked at Stephen again. "Mr. Seagal." That name rippled through the crowd. Gasps followed. Phones zoomed in. Steven Seagal. Federal trainer. Law enforcement consultant. Someone whispered. "That explains everything." The officer who had struck him swallowed hard. His hands trembled slightly. The reality settled in. This was not a random civilian. This was someone who trained those in uniform. The senior officer lowered his voice. "You have our full respect, sir." Stephen nodded slightly. No satisfaction. No pride. Just acknowledgement. The crowd felt the shift immediately. The power balance reversed without noise. The officer who slapped him stared at the ground. Fear replaced arrogance. Stephen finally spoke. "Calm. Clear. I was walking." Nothing more. Those two words carried weight. The senior officer understood. He turned sharply to his subordinate. His disappointment obvious. This was not about fame. It was about conduct. The crowd sensed consequences approaching. Real ones. Stephen looked around at the people watching. At the phones recording. He knew the lesson was already spreading. The senior officer asked quietly, "How would you like to proceed, sir?" Stephen paused. That pause held everyone. Justice was now in his hands. Comment below. Should the officer be suspended or forgiven? Stephen refused retaliation. There was no anger in his voice. No demand for punishment driven by pride. He stood quietly as the senior officer waited for his response. The crowd leaned in. Everyone expected a harsh outcome. Stephen spoke calmly. "This is not about revenge." His words slowed the moment. "I want accountability." Those two words carried weight. The senior officer nodded. He understood immediately. This was not a personal issue. It was a professional one. The officer who had slapped Stephen stood frozen. His face tight. His breathing shallow. The senior officer turned to him. His tone was firm. "Final. You are being removed from duty effective immediately." The words landed heavily. The officer's shoulders dropped. The badge on his chest suddenly felt heavier. He was asked to step aside. His weapon was secured. His authority taken away without spectacle. No shouting. No humiliation. Just consequence. The crowd watched in silence. No cheers. No clapping. People understood this was serious. This was how accountability looked. The second officer stood rigid, learning without being spoken to. Stephen said nothing more. He did not watch the officer being escorted away. He did not need to. The lesson was complete. The senior officer thanked Stephen quietly for handling this with restraint. Stephen nodded. Restraint was natural to him. The crowd slowly began to relax. People lowered their phones. Some exhaled deeply. Traffic noise returned. Engines started moving again. Life resumed its rhythm. Stephen adjusted his jacket slightly. A simple motion. He looked around briefly. At the faces. At the street. Then he turned and walked away. No speeches. No interviews. Just quiet departure. As he moved down the sidewalk, daylight returned to normal. The tension dissolved. People watched him go. Some with respect. Some with reflection. A young man whispered, "That is how strength looks." A woman nodded in agreement. The moment stayed behind even as Stephen left. The street looked the same. But something had changed. Those who witnessed it would remember. Not the slap. But the response. Not the power of authority. But the power of discipline. Stephen disappeared into the crowd. Just another man again. The city continued moving, unaware of the lesson it had just hosted. And the resolution stood quietly, clear, unavoidable. True strength does not need retaliation. It needs responsibility. Respect does not depend on uniform or power. It does not come from badges, titles, or loud voices. Respect begins with how you treat people. When no one important seems to be watching. True strength is calm under pressure. It is the ability to pause, to breathe, to choose control over impulse. Anyone can react with anger. Anyone can shout. Anyone can use force. But not everyone can remain calm when their ego is challenged. Daytime or night, in public or in private, character always shows. It shows in small moments. It shows in uncomfortable moments. It shows when authority meets humility. What happened on that street was not about fame. It was not about status. It was about values. Power tested itself. And discipline answered back. The uniform did not fail. The behavior did. And behavior always tells the truth. Stephen did not win by fighting. He did not win by humiliating anyone. He won by staying himself. That is a lesson many miss. Real respect is quiet. Real confidence does not need validation. When you control your actions, you control the outcome. Every person watching learned something, whether they realized it or not. Some learned about authority. Some learned about restraint. Some learned about accountability. And some learned about themselves. The world is full of noise. But calm always stands out. In moments of pressure, your reaction defines you more than the situation. That is the real takeaway. Not who was slapped. Not who was wrong. But who remained composed. Because, in the end, people remember how you carried yourself. Not how loud you were. Type respect. If you believe humility is real power. And tell me, where are you watching from? Every voice matters.